Hey,
Hey, Lex.
what's up? What is up? What is up, Camelback fam? Welcome to another episode of Humble and Hungry Live, the series where we sit down with revolutionary entrepreneurs in the education and conscious tech space who are out here changing the game, y'all, changing the game. I am your host, Lex Lindsay, the Senior Associate of Marketing and Communications at Camelback, and I am super excited to have my homie here, Jerren Chang, the 2022 Camelback Fellow and co-founder and CEO of GenUnity. Jerren, what's up?
Hey, Lex. What's going on? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I'm super excited to get into our conversation and just dive into what it is that you've been working on and some of your advice for our entrepreneurs that are going to be tuning in. So, I did a quick introduction, but I would love to hear from you. Could you just share a little bit more about who you are and what GenUnity is and what you guys do?
Yeah, sure. For me, the origin story always starts with family, so I'm going to go back to the beginning. All right. I was born in suburban New York. My parents are both immigrants. My dad's originally from China by way of Taiwan, and my mom's from Malaysia. She was an orphan. She was adopted by a single mom there, and she came to the States when she met my dad in the 80s. And I think their stories and this idea of generational inheritance is really what shaped my journey to GenUnity, right? On my dad's side, they got out of poverty because of the civil service exam in China and that system of opportunity that was available, at least to him at the time, right? And in my mom's case, it was the compassion of a single individual that really transformed the trajectory of her life. And I think a lot about our work at GenUnity and my own kind of sense of civic purpose is shaped by this idea of tapping into individual compassion, individual agency to build better systems of opportunity for everyone. And at GenUnity, that's what we aspire to do. We bring residents together, both those experiencing local issues like housing insecurity or health equity, together with folks working in institutions to try to address those problems. We believe that if we can create the space for folks to get to know each other as human beings first, to build community, they'll not only surface and inform better ideas in the short term, but they're going to create this connective tissue, this cross-class, multiracial coalition of people that informs the next 100 best programs, the next 100 best policies, because we know that this type of social change work has to be iterative and has to be long-term.
Yes, man. All of that, all of it. I love it. I'm super excited just to talk more about the work that you guys are doing. And yeah, let's get into it. So, you spoke a little bit about kind of your history and what led to GenUnity. I would love to talk a little bit more, just dive in there a little bit more about like what experiences specifically led you to entrepreneurship. What brought you to even embark on this journey, and then to start GenUnity.
Yeah, I talked about the idea of generational inheritance and kind of the concepts that came with it, but to be honest, I had no idea what that looked like in a career. I actually kind of got pulled into the current of consulting. I worked at McKinsey for a few years, doing mostly public and social sector work, and then went to the mayor's office in Chicago doing economic development policy. And I think it was in those spaces where I started to see how we have a lot of smart, hardworking, well-intentioned people in these kind of like top-down institutions that make a lot of decisions for us, but also a level of disconnect from the communities that we're trying to serve. Mm-hmm. And so I went to Boston, came here to Boston for grad school and have stayed to really look at this question of how do we bring these two groups together, right? Build this connective tissue that allows us to center the community's needs in our work, and creates the foundational layer of trust and collaboration for us each to bring the best of what we can to the table, right? A true kind of micro democracy, so to speak. And that's where we started. We started piloting our work in Boston with a cohort of 32 everyday leaders, right? Focused on housing insecurity, both folks who had experienced eviction and homelessness, alongside folks working in nonprofits and government and the private sector on housing related issues. And from there, we saw the kind of magic of bringing folks together like that and being able to hold that space. And we've now served about 150 folks across the Boston area, and we're continuing to keep going. We're recruiting for our next housing program right now, actually.
Oh man, that is crazy. And how quickly, but when did you guys start GenUnity?
We started in 2020.
2020.
Yeah.
And it's
COVID baby.
Yeah, that's right. And 150 participants later. And that's huge, man. That's awesome. I love just the thought of being able to bridge the gap, because I think within civic engagement, we often think like the people who are making the decisions, or we know that they're so far removed from what's actually happening within our communities. But being able to bridge that gap and open the door for conversation to happen and change. That's where change will actually happen, is being able to connect the two parties together so that they can hear, from the people who are in the trenches and doing the work and experiencing the things that, these policymakers, like the ramifications and the effects of what these policymakers are doing, being able to have our voice heard in there. So I love it.
Preach, Lex. Preach.
Yeah. So I want to talk about the challenges that you have probably faced I know that you have faced challenges because it's tough out here in these streets. If you could just talk to us a little bit about what has been the biggest challenge for you in the work that it is that you're doing, and how have you kind of navigated or overcome those challenges?
Yeah. I think the big thing, especially as a nonprofit founder, the big thing is always that like early access to capital, right? I mean, we talk about it all the time. This is one area where Camelback's so transformational. I mean, most of the early stage capital allocation, nonprofit and I think for profit too, I mean, we always assume that it's like rational and market based, but really we know that it's kind of social capital and connection based. And if you're not coming from those spaces, there's kind of like natural avenues for kind of early stage funding to even just get off the ground is really tough. And almost every early stage funder wants you to already have traction. And so, a couple pilots and et cetera, et cetera. And so, I think that's probably the biggest thing. And, thankfully, in many ways, we've kind of gotten the escape velocity to get out of this kind of first couple of years. But, it especially in nonprofit funding models, it continues to be, growth capital typically comes in a slow trickle, right? It's not kind of like a Series A round or anything like that. And so it's kind of a constant effort to figure out, how do I develop just really authentic and organic relationships with funders, right? It's not anything extractive or transactional, but how do we actually get in front of people and build a genuine relationship? And sometimes that's hard when you're just not swimming in the same social circles, right? So that's probably one of the biggest challenges that I've seen over the last few years.
For sure. We hear that a lot within these conversations. It's typically around funding and how difficult it is, challenging it is, especially if you are a BIPOC founder. It's just like not having access to those same social circles that, our counterparts have. I'm curious then, how have you kind of overcome or like navigated that challenge of being able to, gain social capital or get into spaces and around people who, can fund and support the work that you're doing?
I mean, let me just name that I've had, the huge privilege to go to institutions that have started to open that up, right? Like graduating from Harvard Business School, being able to meet with alumni in that capacity has been a game changer, and one that is clearly like a privilege that and a level of access that should be more broadly available, but I recognize is not. So that's one piece of it. The second is just, the kind of scrappy showing up where people are. Try to figure out where people are and go meet them there and just show up authentically. Try to just build a relationship on a human level before you start pitching anything. It's our work's very local. It's all Boston. And so at the end of the day, there aren't that many places you can meet people in a small city. So you just got to be creative and try to show up and continue to build that community of folks who, even if they're not directly funding the work, know what you're doing and are able to share it with the folks that they're in their networks too.
Oh yeah. I was just having a conversation with someone about this, of just like, it's not always in conversation with, you're having conversation with someone directly who could fund you. It's about opening up your network. And also on, the funder side, funders opening up their networks, especially if they're wanting to be committed to, diversity and advancing, equity and justice, being willing to open up their networks. But there's something that I really want to stamp down is like, the need for people to be advocates on behalf of founders who are BIPOC, women, or non-binary, having champions in our corner who can go and name drop us to the people who have the resources that we so desperately need. Like that is pivotal. I can't stress that enough. If there are funders and investors listening, like, please, if you don't have the resources to offer for a BIPOC founder, like connect, be a connector, because that is just as valuable as writing a check. But off my soapbox for now.
Stay on the soapbox.
So I want to talk a bit about your fellowship experience. You are a 2022 Camelback Fellow. And just, could you share with us how did Camelback, or how pivotal was Camelback in, helping you grow your venture in that way?
Yeah, to be honest, hard to put into words, Lex. Super transformational for me at a time when the organization was in quite a bit of flux. My co-founder was transitioning out, and we were trying to figure out how to navigate that transition. And I had joined this cohort. Basically, I think that all happened in Welcome Week. All of those things at the same time, if I remember.
Wow.
And I think for a long time, just getting the startup off the ground, it's tough work. You're kind of in the grind of it. And I think the most transformational thing was this community of folks where I felt like I had this really deep sense of belonging, right? And a sense of vulnerability, and maybe even more important than that, like almost a rediscovery of joy. And that sounds a little sad in some ways, like where was that before for me? But, you're so focused on the mission, because the mission is a calling, right? I can't imagine anyone doing this and it not being a calling, and just kind of like doing it on a whim. But sometimes that can like obfuscate that there's a ton of joy in the work, even though it's tough. But that needs to be, you need to create space for that. You need to have practices to help foster that. And I think Camelback in the community, the Camelback fam, are kind of always on time +9 group. That's what they help. That was the biggest thing. That was the biggest thing. I left that the fellowship experience just feeling like almost like a renewed sense of how I wanted to show up in the work, in terms of like joy, centeredness, and it's been transformational.
Yeah, I love to hear that. I did not know that you were going through all of that at Welcome Week. You wouldn't have been able to tell we were having such a good time. But
it was a great time.
Yeah, that's crazy that's a lot of change. And I can imagine just the transitions happening and trying to navigate that. We're going to get into a question along those lines a little bit later, but let's talk about legacy. The work that you're doing is hugely impactful, and just there's trickle down effects, being able to bridge these gaps between policymakers and everyday adults. That impacts generations down the line. And so I want to ask, what is a legacy that you are hoping to leave behind for the next in line, that you're hoping GenUnity leaves behind for the next in line?
Yeah. I mean, just a renewed and renovated civic culture, to kind of put it plainly. Our vision is a community by everyone, for everyone, where we're actually all involved in shaping our systems, and we see a world where we're all better off, where we see kind of the ideals, I think, that we envisioned, and kind of what this country could be. We see that manifested. And I think the only way to do that is by figuring out how to collaborate and work together more democratically in the ways that we are trying to experiment with, right? And I think if we can leave any legacy, even if it's just in a piece of the country, right? Like Boston, like the one of the birthplaces of American democracy. If we can just show how that can be done really well, my hope is that we can inspire communities across the country to look at that model and say, what can we do? And hopefully we can inspire the country to actually be a model of democratic governance for the rest of the world, because we've really fallen off on that.
Yeah, no, I thank you for sharing that. Now we'll get to that a little bit later too. When you think about the work, just you've shared what it is that you're doing, the legacy that you want to leave behind. When you think about the work of GenUnity and just social impact overall, why do you believe that social entrepreneurship is so vital to creating a more equitable world?
Yeah, because change is not inevitable. Uh, the kind of market-based system that we have, the kind of current status quo that we have, is not going to shift on its own. I think one of the beautiful things about social entrepreneurship is that it both says we're going to find ways to make this work sustainable, maybe through market-based solutions or other forms of getting to scale, government support, that kind of thing. It also at the same time recognizes that we need to shift how people think this system has to be or even can be designed. That's a culture shift, a behavior shift that is underpins kind of why our systems are in place as they are, right? Like for us, we want to create a space where folks can reimagine what it looks like to actually work together across difference, reimagine what it feels like to actually be kind of in recognition and solidarity, centered in this human connectedness, and this love ethic. And I don't think that's anything short of radical. And I think social entrepreneurship has that piece embedded, while also thinking about how do we operationalize change, make it sustainable, make it scalable.
Oh man. Oh my gosh. This idea of dreaming. I mean, that's what entrepreneurship is, really, or a big part of it, right? Is like dreaming of what the future could be and then working day in and day out to achieve that dream, to make it a reality. I love, just like the reimagining, and like centering it around love and interconnectedness. Because at the end of the day, like, that's what this is all about, right? That's what this life is all about, is just being able to be good to one another, and to live the best life that we can, hand in hand, and make it happen.
100%. I mean, Lex, I could just listen to you talk about this stuff.
Oh man, over here preaching to myself a little bit, but thank you. So I want to, as we're kind of wrapping up here, dive into what's next. What are you guys working on? What's up next for GenUnity the rest of this year, and beyond?
Yeah, the focus for us really in this year and the next couple of years is building what we call a beacon of hope in Boston, right? This exemplar of what our civic culture and our communities can look like and feel like when we work together across these silos to address the shared issues that we have, and the urgent ones, whether it be housing or health or food insecurity, or environmental justice, right? So our hope over the next couple of years is to create, to continue to grow this community of everyday leaders from 150 to 1,000, right? And I think it's very, very doable, and we're excited to kind of build a team, put in the processes and the systems in place to do that well, and to bring in more partners and community members into the work. So that's our aspiration, for the short term. Folks out there interested in Boston, excited, check us out, genunity.org. We're going to be building something special here. So invite anyone who's interested to come join us.
Awesome. I'm curious, you had mentioned, earlier, like right now it's in Boston. GenUnity is based in Boston. Do you guys have any plans of potentially expanding your model, or even bringing GenUnity to other communities, or just being a blueprint for other communities to follow?
Yeah, definitely. If you had asked me that question 3 years ago, we were starting, it was for sure like, we're going to scale we're gonna have GenUnity, little things across the country. I think one of the things that's been remarkable has also been kind of the letting go of, having an eye to that and having a strategy and an idea of how that might happen, but also letting go of the expectation that like every nonprofit has to scale in this particular way, and thinking more about scaling impact and scaling operations, right? And I do think that we'll have to answer the scaling impact question, but it might not necessitate us going to a new city. It might be, to your point, maybe we're laying the blueprint. Maybe we're creating a network of affiliates. I'm not sure what that will look like yet. It's definitely on our minds of how do we take that one, perfect the model and the work that we're doing locally here in Boston, and think about how do we scale impact, even if that means that we're not scaling the size of our own operations.
Oh man, that is a message right there. Just this idea, because you're right. I'm guilty of thinking like, hey, scale means we take ourselves to multiple places, but it could also very well look like we take our model is we offer it up to someone else who can carry it in this place, and then to another person who can carry it in this place, and just being able to like the level of trust that has to come with that, right? Of being able to kind of like let your baby go and be out there in the world and grow and do its thing. That's beautiful.
Yeah. And I mean, it's tough, right? Because I can easily see why we go down kind of the former. There's so much ambition and maybe a little bit of ego and a belief that you figured out how to do it right. But I do think that embedded in the work that we're doing in terms of like renovating our civic culture and finding better ways to kind of more democratic ways of working together is also the trust that has to come with that. Like trusting someone who's closer to the community, closer to that community to figure it out. And you can give scaffolding, but at some point you got to let go because it's going to look different, and that's okay.
Man, that was a word, Jerren. That was a word. Awesome. Well, as we wrap up here, I want to ask about self-care because it is National Wellness Month. And so, as you know, being an entrepreneur, the work of entrepreneurship, especially being a BIPOC entrepreneur and working in the social impact space, it's tough. It's tough. And so for those, just to give inspiration to those who are out there doing the work in the trenches, how do you practice self-care and just managing, mental health and wellness in the work that you're doing?
Yeah, for me, I think about always first is the relationships and kind of the mindsets that underpin, I think, really healthy practices. And so for me, that's, I've got this little journal in front of me, and one of the first boxes on every page is like family first, right? Like, how are you going to contribute love and joy to the people closest to you today and every day, right? Because you filling this out on that like everyday type of journal. And similar to like embedded in that is like the mindset that you deserve joy every day, which to be honest, I don't think that was intuitive to me for a while. So I'm just going to name that for anyone else who's in the same boat. And then I think, from mindsets and relationships, you've got practices on top of that. For me, the practices, daily yoga and meditation. I've been doing a practice that I picked up every day for the last 7 years, I think. That's been really huge for me every morning, like 30 minutes. And just encourage folks to find the practices that work for them, whether that's like going on a morning walk or, taking a long shower or whatever it is. I do think that really understanding what those practices are and observing kind of how they affect the mind and the body are huge. So encourage folks to find theirs.
Man, 7 years meditation and yoga every day. I'm trying to get to that level. I'm going to need this yoga and meditation, this practice that you're doing. I need you to send that over to me, man. So
I'll send it to you.
But all right, as we wrap up, I how can people connect with you if they want to learn more about the work that you're doing, if they want to just connect with you to learn more about your journey as an entrepreneur, kind of pick your brain as they embark on their own journeys? How can folks connect?
Yeah, definitely go to our website, GenUnity.org. Sign up for our newsletter. Email us at team@GenUnity. You can also email me, first name dot last name @GenUnity. And would love to chat. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter. Is it still Twitter, Lex? Instagram, Facebook, whatever Twitter is called.
Next, I don't know anymore.
Our handles are usually at GenUnity or at Join GenUnity, depending on the platform. So follow us, and our newsletter is really focused on it being less, hey, here's what we're doing, and more of like, here's how you can take the principles of what we're doing and apply them in your own lives. So excited for folks to follow that.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing those. Well, folks, that is all that we have time for today. Jerren, it has been a true pleasure, man, just reconnecting with you, learning about the things that you've been up to, or hearing about the things that you've been up to, because it's been a while since we talked. And I just appreciate you taking the time to share your knowledge and wisdom and your story with us. There are some gems in there. So go back, folks, if you need to, and get your pen and paper out, take some notes.
I appreciate you, Lex. Thank you for making this platform and for having us on. It's incredible, and just another extension of the kind of amazing spirit and values of Camelbacks. Just appreciate you.
Awesome. Thank you. And as always, thank you all for joining us today. It's been a pleasure. A quick announcement. Our 2024 Camelback Fellowship application will be open on August 21st. So for all of my entrepreneurs who are tuning in, if you are building a venture in education or technology, we want to hear from you. Go head over to our website, www.camelbackventures.org/apply, and submit an interest form so you can get all of the updates, all of the resources in regards to the application. And we'll be back on August 22nd for our next Humble and Hungry conversation. So until then, be well, and we'll catch you next time.